Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Carlo Tortora Brayda. I'm the founder and executive chairman of the Tortora Brayda Institute. On behalf of the Tortora Brayda Institute and the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces, I'd like to welcome you to this engaging panel discussion on the Biden-Harris administration's recently unveiled National Cyber Workforce and Education Strategy. We'll call it NCWES for short. I'd like to extend a special thank you to our veterans who are joining us today, either on the panel or in the audience. Your service is deeply appreciated. Your experiences and insights, especially in the realm of cybersecurity, can be invaluable as we discuss this strategy designed to strengthen our national cyber force. Before we begin, I'd like to share a little bit about the Tortora Brayda Institute and our session partner, AUSCF, and our sponsor. The Tortora Brayda Institute was created to promote collaboration across public and private sectors with a focus on business, technology, culture, and diversity. We are looking to reshape and develop collaboration and partnering practices with a view to improving and securing business and the economy by leveraging and optimizing AI and cybersecurity. The core concept of the Institute is our think tank for partnership excellence. The think tank has allowed us to bring together experts and leaders from civil society, the public and private sector, academia, from around the world to reshape and develop collaboration and partnering practices whilst embracing the most critical technology growth. Through our AI and cybersecurity talent gap task force, we're actively addressing the critical shortage of skilled professionals in cybersecurity and AI. Our mission is to collaborate with experts, evaluate solutions, and promote partnerships to enhance workforce development. By empowering underrepresented groups, by fostering diversity, and offering educational initiatives like workshops, job fairs, and scholarships, we're dedicated to bringing the talent gap and fortifying our nation's cyber defense. As such, we at the Tortora Brayda Institute are fully committed to supporting the national cyber workforce and education strategy. If you're not currently a member of the Institute, we invite you to visit our website to learn more and see how you can participate. Next, I would like to recognize our cherished, admired, and respected long-standing partner organization, the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces, for all their support in helping us to put together this event. The Association of U.S. Cyber Forces is a nonprofit military veteran service organization, an MVSO, that provides the voice for cyber professionals who serve in the military and with other national security agencies, as well as within industry, on specific cyber issues impacting national security. AUSCF is an advocate for positive change to policies and programs that better serve their membership and help minimize gaps between the private and public sector cybersecurity efforts. Finally, a special thank you to our sponsor for this event, Gorilla Corporation. Gorilla Corporation is a leading global sales, marketing, and technology channel development company, growing partner revenue for industry giants and startups alike. So as we dive into today's critical discussion, let me introduce to you our esteemed panelists who bring a wealth of knowledge from the public sector, the private industry, academia, the military, and more. So let me just start off with what I have. Joshua Reiter. Joshua Reiter is Deputy Principal Cyber Advisor, Department of the Navy. Joshua Reiter is the Department of the Navy Deputy Principal Cyber Advisor. In this role, he is responsible for supporting the PCA in advising the Secretary of the Navy, Chief of Naval Operations, and Commandant of the Marine Corps in implementing the Department of Defense cyber strategy within the Department of the Navy. Mr. Reiter also serves in the additional capacity as the Department of the Navy Chief Information Officer, DON CIO, Chief Workforce Officer. He was originally appointed to the Defense Intelligence senior level in December 2018 as the Director of Cyber Workforce Policy and Planning under the Cybersecurity Directorate of OPNAV N2 N6. I hope that's all correct. He serves as the Chief Workforce Officer for the Department of the Navy, with a career spanning over 17 years in various capacity in naval intelligence. Joshua is a veteran in maritime and cybersecurity. Before pivoting to cyber, he was a U.S. Coast Guard licensed merchant mariner and also maritime information systems for the Massachusetts Port Authority. A retired Navy Reserve Information Warfare Officer, he holds degrees in computer science, mathematics, and national security and strategic studies, alongside multiple professional certifications. Joshua's multidimensional experience makes him a significant voice in both maritime and cyber domains. So welcome to the panel, Joshua. We're very pleased to have you. Next is on my list is David Klink, former senior enlisted advisor to JFHQ DODIN, Commander Chief Master Sergeant, 24th Air Force, Command Chief Master Sergeant, Air Forces Cyber, and Command Chief Master Sergeant, Joint Force Headquarters, Cyber Joint Base San Antonio, Lackland, Texas. David Klink, a senior Air Force veteran with 31 years of experience, who's now leveraging his expertise as the Vice President of Business Development and Programs at Vulnerability Research Labs, a GDIT subsidiary, specializing in software development for government customers. David brings a wealth of skills in business development, strategy, and program management. Beyond the defense sector, he's a successful entrepreneur as the owner of Klink Properties and Management, where for over 20 years, he's been revitalizing distressed properties into rental units across Maryland, New Jersey, and Louisiana. His military background includes significant leadership roles, serving as Command Chief for the 24th Air Force and as a senior enlisted advisor at DISA. David's multidisciplinary experience makes him an insightful contributor to discussions on threat analysis, cybersecurity, and business strategy. Thank you for being with us, David. And next, please welcome Colonel Richard J. D'Angelo, Cyber Capability Development and Integration Directorate, U.S. Army Futures Command. A strategic and innovative leader with over 25 years of experience in cyberspace operations and IT management, currently serving as the Chief of Analysis and Cyber Concepts at the U.S. Army Futures Command. He specializes in future planning and scenario development for large-scale combat operations. Throughout his career, Colonel D'Angelo has excelled in multiple capacities, from Deputy Battle Captain at Cyber Command to Executive Assistant to the Director of Operations. Notably, he commanded the only forward-deployed signal battalion in Afghanistan, providing crucial defensive cyber and network support to over 30,000 users. A graduate at the top of his seminar from the Army War College, he brings a unique blend of technical expertise and leadership qualities that make him an indispensable voice in the realm of cybersecurity. Very, very proud to have you here, sir. Next is David Merritt. David Merritt, Director of Defensive Analytics at Kenvue, a retired Air Force veteran with a rich 20-year career dedicated to cyber operations, research, and education. Most notably, he served as the head of the Department of Computer and Cyber Sciences at the U.S. Air Force Academy, where he influenced the next generation of cyber talent while collaborating with industry and government on cutting-edge research. Before that, he was a key player at the U.S. Cyber Command, pioneering public-private partnerships for advanced cyber R&D, and also served with the Air Force Computer Emergency Response Team, safeguarding network integrity. Now, David is the Director of Defensive Analytics at Kenvue, where he's bringing data science and machine learning into the realm of cyber defense. With a PhD from the University of Michigan, focusing on hybrid intelligence and social computing, David's broad skill set bridges the gap between academia, government, and industry. I'm absolutely floored by the level of panelists today. Next on the list is our dear Michael Tismeyer, Executive Director of the U.S. National AI and Cybersecurity ISAL. Michael Tismeyer is a veteran cybersecurity executive with 20 years or more of experience. He holds CDE PSC credentials and is co-founder and executive director of the U.S. National and AI Cybersecurity Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. And he represents that within the NATO cyber ecosystem. Through this platform, he works with a range of stakeholders to enhance national security and economic competitiveness, focusing on the convergence of AI and cybersecurity. Prior to this, he served as CISO for various Silicon Valley companies. In addition to that, and making him really relevant to the discussion today, Michael has served on NIST's NICE Public Working Group. He served on a working group for ISO 27021 and the international standard for competency requirements for InfoSec professionals. He's also served on the Silicon Valley Talent Forum, which included Microsoft, NVIDIA, and IBM, helping UC California and University of California and University of California, San Francisco align their curriculum better with industry needs. He next created a capability skill matrix mapping experience, academic qualifications, and certifications to job profiles and experience levels, similar to DoD 8140. And has never spent a day since 2003 without being enrolled into a program, taking courses continuously. He has 60 certifications in executive education courses achieved from Harvard, Yale, MIT, Cornell, and Stanford. Michael is also a notable speaker, author, and board advisor in his field. And finally, the person that really pulls us all together, and I'm immensely grateful to him, Nathan Rolfe, the president of the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces. Nathan Rolfe is a cybersecurity veteran with 22 years of military service across the Army and Navy Reserves. As the president of the Association of U.S. Cyber Forces, Nathan is at the forefront of strengthening America's cyber workforce for national security. He's played pivotal roles in both the Army's 1st Offensive Information Operations Unit and the Navy's Information Warfare Community. With 11 years dedicated to U.S. Cyber Command, Nathan has been instrumental in its stand-up and policy development. Currently, he leads the National Security Services Division at Securicon. Academically, he holds multiple master's degrees in fields such as cybersecurity and defense and strategic studies. Off-duty, he's active in youth military programs, serving on boards and offering guidance to future leaders. That is the lineup for today's conversation. It was definitely worth going into these very illustrious backgrounds. With that said, I'm really excited about today's conversation. I think it's going to give us a lot of insights. And just to start off, let me ask the panelists today, what is your initial impression of the NCWES? Does it, in your opinion, sufficiently address the cybersecurity skills gap? Who would like to take that?
I guess I'll go.
Please.
Thanks, Carlo, for the good intros. Yeah, I think the strategy is, first of its kind, as far as I'm aware, that actually attempts to try to factor in the many variables it will require to have a nice national cyber workforce. So we're talking about education and training and monetary incentivization for educators, and even just community programs that help bolster all these things, right, for students and for educators. So at a quick glance, I'm pleased that it at least attempted to pull in all those factors that I haven't seen all in one place before.
Thank you for that. Would you like to chime in, Michael?
Yeah, sure. I think I would like in these conversations usually to stick to my domain of experience, which is primary either industry or public-private partnership, right? So I think the strategy is definitely very encompassing, and I am encouraged by the fact that a document like this even exists. But coming from an industry perspective, my fear is this too late? Given where we're heading to, given the rapid commoditization of artificial intelligence and its use across industry. In 2015, Peter Reinhardt, was the co-founder of Segment, a giant data company, wrote an article that was called Life Below the API. That article was picked up by Google. Google wrote about it. MIT Review wrote about it. And what he was talking about was that basically society is getting split into people that tell computers what to do and people that are being told by computers what to do. And that this is drastically impacting your life and your position within society. A lot of what I'm seeing in here, I would have loved to see in response to 2015. Because the question is now, when we are getting to the point where advanced data skills might be more important, I wonder whether this is a little bit too late, actually.
Good point. In the panel's opinion, in your opinion, how's this talent gap, the cyber security in particular, because the document is very broad, right? And it relates to really anything pertaining to digital computer knowledge, etc., right? So when you look at specifically at cyber defense, which is something that really worries a lot of us, and such like defense of critical infrastructure, how do you guys see the reality in day-to-day operations? Because certainly from my perspective, I see a lot of I see an element of debate. Some folks are saying, well, yeah, there is a cybersecurity talent gap. In fact, today I think that it was reported as being 640,000 as a gap. It is significant in numbers, but yet when it comes to the actual reality on the industry, not everybody feels it. Not everybody feels that there is such a screaming gap. Yet we have also reports where I think the FBI not long ago issued an article saying that China was essentially outgunning us on cyber hackers on a ratio of 50-1. So please share some of your own experiences from life in the Army, life in your own respective businesses, industrially, and as civil servants. What are your opinions?
Okay. I'd like to add, if I could, one. I mean, I think Michael's right. The document, if you look forward, you don't want to build how are you going to train a force for today's network and cyberspace, right? You need to think forward. But I'll give it this: if you're building that foundation, then in the future you're great. But it doesn't necessarily greatly address the gap that we have today. How do we fill the gap of professionals, someone who's already in 5 years, already in 20 years? How do they transition and fill those roles? And I think that's still TBD. And what we see, I think where there's still errors and mistakes is thinking that everybody needs to be a STEM expert. I think we need more diversity. I think the document was awesome in talking about that. And the idea that, yeah, you need some engineers, you need people that are mathematically experts, but you also need tinkerers. You need the equivalent of a mechanic who in World War II thought of putting, the welding on the front of the tank to get through the rows. You got to have that person that can tinker with software and do something in the field, and that's not the same skill set as somebody who's got that engineer skill. So I think a document like this might help think through those challenges and shortening the gap between what we do currently and what someone does maybe more cyber oriented. And I think you're right. From my side, as introduced, as we look forward for the Army, we want to keep that asymmetric advantage, right? We want to keep the ability to exercise command and control, but do it with human machine teaming, where there's AI fusion together, and do it, disparately. But we got to have folks that understand that at different levels, that whatever their particular skill set is, there's going to be some cyber flavor to it. And so certainly hope the document gets towards.
Yeah, and I'd like to jump in on the tail end of that too, is having sat at the operational level at DISA and Joint Force Headquarters Doden, and being the recipient of both DOD and federal policy, to be that operational piece. I always look for funding and I look for teeth, and either one of those two can fail a really brilliant policy. We looked at the cloud strategy as it came out. It had funding, it had the large contracts and pieces behind it, but it had no teeth to get people to change to it or use it. And on the flip side, there's other policy that comes out that's very well written, brilliant ideas, but if there's no funding behind it, it's not going to be able to be implemented down the chain. And so, you know, as a first read new out is I was piecing through there looking for what is this going to provide to the educators? What is this going to provide to the schoolhouses? What is this going to come down in a funding sense? And what's going to be the forcing factor to bring people into it? And that's, you know, that's always that balance of resource that our government leaders have to do. And I think it's there, but we're going to need to distill down that next echelon, which is that operational piece of where will the teeth and the levers be pulled to use this? Because I think it's very well written, but I as to make it practical, I would need those levers or those pieces to get after it. And that was really my biggest takeaway when I first went through it.
Yeah, I agree. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, and implementing a cyber strategy is never an easy thing. And that's really kind of where, you know, we've found, as an institute, have found a reason for existing, is in trying to look at strategies and then looking at you know, what steps are actually going to be required in order to make them you know, make them successfully implementable, if you like. What partnerships are necessary in order to drive it forward. Sometimes, sometimes there can be a little bit of a disconnect. What have you seen so far in terms of signals with regards to funding, David? Anything at all has sort of anything that has crossed your table as yet?
Well, having entered the new world and crossing over into industry, I'm not on the inside pulse, but I will tell you that for my government contacts that I still socialize and go with, the air's been sucked out of the room with the continuing resolution. Any talk we've had in the last 4 to 6 weeks is what can you all get done before the cutoff at the end of this? And I'm not here to point out politics or the rest, but you asked a pointed question. It's sucking most of the oxygen out of the room because there's a looming date and things are starting to impact operations and mission, and that's really what's taking it in. So I think we're going to have to see that get settled before we see something move out on the funding side of that.
That's concerning. That's concerning because every day matters, right? And there's no time to waste. How do you go in terms of, from the perspective of the armed forces, where do you see the talent gap being most painful? In which type of roles, what seniority levels? And so far, what do you know has worked so far and what hasn't worked? Could anybody share any comments along those lines? In terms of intake mechanisms, I'm talking about.
We certainly still have a problem at the lowest level. The Army, a challenge, I suppose I'd say for the Army, but it's probably true for all the services. If you're trying to take someone out of high school and then have them have industry certifications and be allowed to be on the network in accordance with policies, that's a problem, right? And so we've tried to adapt. We've tried to come up with creative rules of saying, hey, as long as they've got someone on their shoulder that's allowed, then we'll get them on the network. But that is just a challenge that we have, is we're trying to take almost too inexperienced of a person and then expect that they have the authorities and responsibilities and can handle it at that early level, based on the requirements listed by industry and adopted by DoD, right? It's the right thing to do. It just causes us a challenge. I think on the other side of that, again, is the over-reliance on looking at somebody who has a skill set in the military, who, you know, their occupational specialty has something to do with cyber or signal or DoD, you know, information operations, and saying, well, you just handle it. I think we're a lot better at that, but that crutch, if you will, of just saying, I don't want to deal with it, I'm infantry, I don't want to deal with it, I fly planes, doesn't really work very well, and we've got to get past that area.
Yeah, thank you for that. Do you find that is it desirable from within the armed forces to source cyber personnel from the private sector, or not? How does that work? Give me a little insight into your sourcing mechanism. Is the private sector an important feeder for you, or should it be?
I can give you one piece that I know the Air Force and Army has been doing the last 2-3 years, and they've allowed for a direct commissioning program for cyber officers all the way up to the rank of 05. And so this has allowed, it hasn't scaled. We're not talking hundreds, but we've been able to bring both in the Army and the Air Force some exquisite talent into the service branches. And the only way to do that is not start the person out at the very first level. If they have 10 years, 12 years in industry, they've been successful, they've been educated, you can't have them come in and expect to fill the role of a second lieutenant. And so each year, the two services has funded that. Maybe Josh can give us on the Navy, but I can speak specifically for Air Force and Army. Is we continue to assess talent into the officer ranks that way. And the biggest piece with it now is scaling. We're up in the scores, a few dozen each year, and we could see that number continue to grow.
Yeah, thank you. Josh, would you like to add to that from the perspectives from the U.S. Navy?
Sure, I'll cover a few things. One, I'll say that I don't think it's too late. I think it's late, but we haven't lost. We're all still here. So I think we're behind the power curve, but I would challenge anyone who's more of a history major than I am, because I was a computer science major, to show me a time in history where some technical innovation came through and supply outpaced demand for talent to work in that industry. I'm sure when the car was first produced, there was a shortage of skilled automotive workers who could push them off the line. And I think we're facing something similar now. So I'm pretty optimistic about the plan. I agree with my colleagues in terms of we are facing shortages on the military side. Cyber is just another limiting factor, where we have a population that is challenged with obesity, with drug use, with other health issues, to the point where it's a very small set of the civilian population that's even eligible to join the military. And then add on top of that the military challenge of recruiting and retaining cyber personnel who are sought after in private industry for much higher compensation, and it just compounds that problem. So I don't see it as a unique problem to cyber. I see it as a compounding problem to the other ones that we're facing in other skill areas. And I think we have to be very creative about how we assess people based on talent and potential, as opposed to demonstrated capability and experience.
How about the concept of mentorship and like apprenticeships? Is that something that is done? I was struck positively by the comment I think Colonel Angelo made earlier about the fact that we need mechanics, tinkerers, that sort of skill set that is quite kind of particular. It doesn't come from having a particular type of degree. It comes really from being groomed. And that's a very important role. You're right. How do we envisage industrializing this flow of tinkerers? Is apprenticeship something that would fit in? I mean, can you comment?
I think that's where the military excels in terms of bringing in legitimately entry-level people. I mean, I'm pretty sure that somewhere there's an unofficial wall of shame. There's certainly enough posts of entry-level positions on LinkedIn that require 8 years of Python, or a master's degree position that pays $15 an hour. There's all sorts of unrealistic expectations, and I think that the uniformed military services, and certainly my colleagues from the Army and Air Force can weigh in. But certainly for the Navy and the Marine Corps, we excel at bringing people in at truly entry-level high school graduates and training and mentoring and educating and bringing them up the ranks. we do lose a significant percentage of those people over the course of their career to higher paying private sector jobs after they're trained. But when you look at, say, the aviation community, no one is screaming about the problem that aviators leave active duty military service to go work for the airlines, because that's been a thing for decades, and it's built into the recruiting models and the retention models to allow for it. Cyber being the new kid on the block, we haven't gotten there yet. So we have this greater sense of panic, like, oh my God, we train these people with, really valuable skill sets, and then they go work in industry, just like pilots, just like people who operate nuclear reactors in the Navy. And we have things in place for those other communities, and we're starting to get some traction with cyber accepted service within the Department of Defense and some other initiatives, but they're still fairly immature, and they're still coming up. So, the biggest thing that I see about the strategy is it's the first thing that I've seen that sort of really takes this holistically very seriously. And even though absolutely, if there's no funding behind a lot of these initiatives, we're not really going to get anywhere. But I think the educational pieces are all going to fall to the states. North Dakota has instituted a cybersecurity requirement for K through 12. Not exactly where I thought that would be leading the pack, but we now have a state that's made that part of their educational curriculum. And my hope is that this federal document will then inspire the states and maybe shape federal funding for schools that offer this, which will then lead to a better military pipeline, which will then lead to more apprenticeships. But I think it all sort of boils down to entry level doesn't mean what the majority of the industry thinks it means anymore.
Hey, and just to pile onto that, Carla, you asked about, or you used the word apprenticeship. I think that's a really cool vocational pathway idea to have apprenticeships, but I'm not sure it'll be useful until we have better defined what the different pathways are in cyber. There's not just the cyber pathway at the military, right? There's lots of different skill sets involved in cyber, many of them STEM, many of them not. Some of them on the offense, some of them on defense, some of them infrastructure, some of them designing and UX. So I think if we can better define the actual things we think we need skill set wise, until we do that, I'm not sure apprenticeships would make much sense.
So I think it would be great to mention the Army, the U.S. Army Futures Command started something called the Software Factory. And the idea there is to bring in anybody who has some capability and desire to learn. It doesn't matter what your background is right now, right? You could just be a mechanic. You could just be a cook. You could be a cyber person, but we're bringing it over there. Obviously, it's limited. It's small. And the idea is bringing in people that have that digital fluency to select, tune, and apply digital tools and techniques to a desired outcome. And in the immediate term, to take something and perhaps make a systematic report in some system that really, we've all come across it where it just stinks, right? It's awful. And then if we can, in a web app way, make it better, use technology to make it better for the average employee, that's great. Now, I bring that up because that's just the Army, but I don't see why civilian industry can't have also essentially that internal process of, it's not exactly apprenticeship, but it is in a way. And it's just, here's an Army as an organization said, we have a problem, we have a need. Let's look to our own selves and see if we can repurpose people. But it seems to be that would make sense on the outside, civilian side.
Yeah, I like that comment. Sorry, I'm going to pile on again. See if you can repurpose people. I think another way of saying that is it's more than just a STEM background that has high potential in the entire cyber domain. I have worked for and with some excellent folks who do not have STEM degrees, but they had the potential to learn some really critical skills in the cyber domain, and they turned out to be leaders. So I think it's really important. Again, I'm going to double down on that we look outside STEM as well.
Yeah, I like that. I like what you just said, David.
I actually want to comment on that as well. Even the industry perspective, gatekeeping is a massive issue. My experience is exactly the same. I know VPs in Silicon Valley that have never had a degree. Wozniak, if I correctly remember, didn't have a degree. So we are over reliant on these items. They're important, but so for example, with the position that I used to hire for, I had no like set requirement for degrees or anything in there. It was like, this is what would be nice to have, and this is how the job looks like. These are the problems you'll be working at, and then I have to basically go in and do the assessment by myself in the end to figure out whether this candidate is qualified or not, because there's so many different roads that lead to Rome, proverbially speaking. And that then leads to, in industry, we also have the problem, which is kind of part of the talent gap is self-inflicted by creating these absolutely ridiculous job descriptions, supposedly entry level, that have all of these requirements for degrees, for certifications that cost $8,000, right? And probably everybody here knows which vendor I'm talking about. That's absurd given the current environment. But I think industry needs a little bit help here from regulators at times, which is, I don't think much of this will change unless there's added oversight. And this is not only in terms of like the hiring issues, but also issues with cyber itself, the way it's done in private industry often. And keep in mind, Silicon Valley background, right? There's this disdain for compliance. And that leads to issues with recruitment, retention. There's so many companies that will have these job offers, these job positions out there just so that they can claim they're looking for someone. And they're on purpose have written absolutely ridiculous. So if something happens, I can say, yeah, I've been looking for a security architect for an entire year and I haven't gotten this person. Well, yeah, you were asking for 10 certifications and we were paying $68,000 asking the person to live and work in San Francisco. No surprise. I know an airport that's looking for a CISO for the last 4 years, very concerning, by the way, that had a 12-page requirements list. Absolutely absurd. So there needs to be some kind of added stimulus, I think, a little bit. And then there are issues right now very specific to the CISO position. There's not many job fields, I think, where if you ask a entry-level person or somebody that has worked the field for 2 or 3 years, where they say, I would never want to be a CISO. I would never want to be the highest thing that I could reach inside of this domain. You hear this all the time if you're working in industry. So that just is an underlying example, as an example, there's something fundamentally kind of wrong right now with the way cyber is positioned inside of companies, whether it has to do with personal liability of CISOs or whether it has to do with the requirements that are being imposed upon entry-level candidates. It's just, we have a lot of work to do here.
Thank you, Michael.
I'd like to pile on that too. Going back to what Michael's saying with the gatekeepers, when you're talking about hiring, we live in a world of automation, and if a resume doesn't have keywords on it, this certification, this degree, this number of years of experience, it may never get to the hirers that have the ability to see past the text on the resume, to actually look at the talent of that individual, to assess their abilities. I saw a lot of skills-based assessment discussions in the strategy, and that's great if you can get to that point. If an HR manager, a recruiter, somebody that doesn't actually understand this field and doesn't know what to look for beyond what their recruiting algorithm tells them is a good resume, those individuals with talent will never get to that skills-based assessment piece of it. And just because I've got the mic now, I'll go back to some other comments that were made earlier. I think you even saw in the comments about the K through 12 piece of this. This is a workforce strategy. This isn't just about people that are currently in the workforce. This is going to go into what the future of this country looks like as far as the people entering the workforce. And if we aren't focusing more on that K through 12 and the earlier education aspects of this as well, then we're going to miss out. Then we're going to constantly be in the reaction mode, and which is going to be the constant challenge for the military. They're always going to be that way because, quite frankly, those of us that have served know that agility in education is not a skill of the military. It is not able to pivot fast enough in its education pipeline. But when we move down into the school systems, into the K through 12, not only through basic, just fundamental digital citizen knowledge that gets put in there, but how are we assessing and evaluating aptitude and talent in our students before they are actually put into classes where they can excel? Are we going to be able to educate our teachers or educators to identify when someone has the right mindset, when someone has the right way of looking at the world, that they're actually going to be a very high potential to be successful in this field. When we joined the military, a lot of veterans on here, we took aptitude tests going in, to see, oh, hey, congratulations, you're going to be an awesome mechanic, or, you have an aptitude for languages, all those kind of things. That was, again, post high school. What are we doing in the meantime? Where can we evaluate and identify who those folks are early, middle school, even late elementary school, to be able to put them in a path that they can actually grow and nurture those capabilities. And, what was talked about earlier, teeth and funding, that becomes a challenge as well. But until we start looking further down the pipeline, as opposed to who's trying to get a job today, we're going to miss those opportunities as well.
Yeah, wise words, Nathan. And to respond to the first point you made, which I think is, they're all very valuable. But yeah, the AI always parses the first round of interviews, and AI is currently, the way it's designed, is looks for keywords, as you said, and it misses out often enough on real good quality candidates. How would you go about making a change to that process? Have you heard of any solutions to that could be rolled out nationwide, or is it something that we need to have some working groups sort of kick around until some proper solutions are found to that type of problem as well?
So I'm gonna jump on that grenade if
yeah.
So I have been on somewhat of a crusade for several years that the place where we are missing the education and the training and the certification is in the human resource and the line management of cyber and STEM personnel. I get LinkedIn messages from recruiters all the time saying, hey, you'd be perfect for a job at half the salary that I make, for some entry-level IT job. They clearly have no idea what the certifications are, what the education requirements are, what different jobs are. And a lot of times, they're looking for those keywords, Security Plus or CISSP or whatever the certification is, but they have no depth of understanding of what it takes to actually do a job. The certifications, I'm a fan of certifications as one thing in a whole person evaluation of whether somebody can do a job, but any given hacking certification is likely to end with a multiple choice examination, and I've yet to see a login screen that says, to bypass this login screen, please select the most correct of these 4 answers. That's just not the way life works. So we need to do better in training our HR folks and training managers of cyber personnel, of IT personnel, in those management techniques. I critique people on the regular when I walk into a manager's office and I look at their bookshelf, and all of their books are their CEH manual, their CISSP manual, their Security Plus manual, not a single book on leadership, not a single book on change management. And I know right off the bat that that's going to be a failing team without anything, So my magic question is, what's on your bookshelf? And some of my colleagues on the panel have highlighted, individual instances of recruiting problems and management problems, but a lot of reasons that these positions remain vacant. Some of them I leave room for the possibility, as I believe Michael said, that they're deliberately sandbagging their own hiring process for whatever reason they may have. I don't think I've ever encountered that within the Department of Defense. I think people are legitimately trying to fill every position they're posting, but I still look at a lot of the posting and ask, do you actually have a person in mind? Because if you don't actually know the person with all of these requirements that you've laid out, you have statistically zero chance of finding them. Like if you think this person exists and you know their name and they're sitting on a couch somewhere waiting for the call, great. But if you're just putting this out there looking for a response, it's not going to happen. We need to be more realistic of balancing the experience we actually need with the talent that's out there.
And I want to take something Josh said and push it along a little further too. As I've crossed over from being on the government side to starting to be in private, I've been looking at ads for hiring positions differently, obviously. And I can say that the agencies, my own agency I just left, and many of the other big ones that we would think of, they drive that requirements for certification or degree into the hiring of their contracts. And so it leaves the company very little flexibility when it says all program managers must have a PMP. Well, that's a 7-day boot camp that you pay a couple grand for. And, the majority of people can pass that test, but yet I can't bring or compete for that position if the person doesn't already have that cert. And so although industry owns a piece of that, government is passing that along in how they're designing their contracts and their work support, because it's blocked. We don't have that flexibility to just say, I recognize the talent here. This person has the skills required for the position. I'd like to put them in it. I can't do that because the contract or the agency I'm servicing says I can't. And so it's bigger than just industry, and I wanted to get that in there.
Well, that happens for two reasons, I believe. One, because going back to my original point, the HR people don't really understand what they're hiring. So they look for the easy button, which is, okay, if they have this, then I can say they're qualified and nobody can argue with me because industry has certified them as being qualified. And I believe that's the HR professional and the hiring manager not really understanding what it is they're trying to buy in the marketplace. So they just, they look for a brand, a label, to make it easy.
So this switching gears a little bit, I wanted to talk about, because the one thing that came through to me, one of the key things that really struck me on this document was the focus really that the document places on partnerships, private-public partnerships, and also international partnerships. So I wanted to steer it a little bit in that direction as well. If I just quote the strategic objective 1.3, foster global progress in foundational cyber skills. I'd like to get your perspectives on the international nature there, right? It says exchange best practices and improving foundational cyber skills with international partners and allies. Promote the development of international standards and frameworks relating to foundational cyber skills. So let's talk about the importance of knowledge sharing with our international partners and allies. Why, if you guys think that's important, why you think it's important, and if you think it's something that should be done later, we should first fix a problem at home. I'd like to have your views on that too. Would anybody like to take this? Maybe Michael?
Okay, so yeah, I can talk about some of the work that we've done overseas, and then maybe of course, Nathan or somebody else probably has a lot of things to say there as well. So I'm running our cyber diplomacy international outreach programs in Eastern Europe, and we also just started setting ourselves up in Latin America as well. And the reason we've done that is because, of course, cyber threats, and I'm talking about cybersecurity, not cyber, the general domain, don't really care for borders, right? We're living in an interconnected world. Our resources are everywhere. Our people are sitting everywhere. Development centers in Romania, God knows where. You have your customer service centers there. That's all your attack surface, right? So if you are wanting to harden your ecosystem, you have to look at the entire ecosystem. Doesn't mean that you're losing focus on that the homeland comes first, right? But you have to look at the entirety of that. So the way we've done that is we started working with the American Chambers of Commerce. We started reaching out to embassies, OSAC, for example, and we started kind of engaging them in dialogue to see what joint problems exists, where we can fill in and help solve some of those problems, and whether there's a problem that might not get enough attention that we can then surface in our conversations with agencies or with other thought leaders in the field. So that's generally speaking our perspective, why this is important and what we're doing to solve this. I think that there's also always knowledge transfer where we are learning. And some of those areas, I think, go back to this pre-college education, right? Because some other countries are already engaged in efforts of integrating cybersecurity literacy into their school system fairly early, some of them as early as kindergarten, of course, age appropriate, right? I was familiar of a effort in Latvia. Latvia is a Baltic country below Estonia and on top of Lithuania, if you're not familiar with that. And before COVID, they had an effort where they were specifically working with kindergarten and elementary school to work this in. And then COVID happened, and when COVID happened, I think it stopped. And based on what I recall, it actually was taken up again after that, and they started working on this. So those things I think are incredibly important to learn from. Now, funny enough, if you look at cyber capacity building programs of the United States that we're doing overseas in nations, usually one key aspect requirement if you're trying to bid for this is that your proposal includes a strategy for pre-college pre-college education for cyber and capability enhancement. So we're actually preaching this outside. So I think we definitely need to start working this internally as well.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword is really how I feel about it. Having spent time living over in Europe and just coming into this field, when we're on the offensive cyber, we'll kind of say the pointy end of the spear within the DoD. There's a lot of secrets. There's a lot of pieces that have to be close held. There's a lot of things that can't be shared. And, we have partners, Jerusalem, the Baltic countries, others, where it's a very complex mixed relationship on friendliness versus, I'll say observation. But I share this in that the talent may be resident there. If we're working in a certain niche or a certain piece, the amount of humans on the globe that have a skill in a certain browser or a certain thing may be measured in the hundreds. And that talent's not all going to be within the US borders. So I guess where I'm saying is, there's a time and a place for that partnership and that level of sharing and to do it. But know that every time we do that, it comes with a risk to our foundational tools, to our knowledge base, to what we bring. And so it's a very difficult, it's a gray answer. There's not a right, wrong, left, right. It's a very grayscale situational piece that has to be weighed out for what you're specifically doing and who you're working with. We see that time and time again. And I do feel, before I pass it back, that we're getting better at it. It used to always be no. If you wanted to work with, you would have named them in any of those countries, the answer would have been no. And so we've improved, but we need to balance that with the realistic risk that we know is there.
I think on the international side, it really comes down to that adage: a rising tide raises all boats, right? We're all professionals in this industry on this call, and we know that all it takes is one person, one person let their guard down, or somebody that didn't know enough not to click that link or open that email to cause a catastrophic issue. It's when we look at the partner countries, we look at other the international efforts. We need to look at setting what that new standard is for. I think Mike, you said the words that cyber literacy. Going across the population, we all need to recognize that this isn't going away. This isn't a fad. The internet's been around a little while. It's here to stay. And so see the comment on the call at MGM, exactly my point. But the working with other countries, just as we establish standards of healthcare, standards of other education, and what we think is basic human rights and a basic standard internationally for what that needs to look like, we can do that within the cybersecurity realm. Absolutely understand what David was talking about in terms of information sharing, and when you start getting into classified, and we don't necessarily want to go that route, of course. But when we talk about that foundational education and baseline knowledge of the average citizen globally, that's something that I think we definitely need to be taking a look at and see how we can improve. And then finally, with an organization that has U.S. in our title, this is definitely a national strategy. But I hate to say it, folks, we aren't the best in every single thing out there, and we can learn too. Especially when we start talking about countries like Estonia that are doing this every day as part of their basic existence. There's some things to take back and bring back into the U.S. We can incorporate with our own unique. They learn from our partners as well, not just be those the country that's out there pushing our own standard out.
Hey, I want to continue that thought, Nate. I love it that to think that we've solved all the problems is a little bit arrogant in the US. And I'm not sure anyone's even saying that, but other countries that are more resource constrained have been forced to prioritize how they solve some of these problems in ways that we are not forced to yet. So they may have solved some corner cases or edge cases of real problems that we haven't seen or we're not really sure how to solve yet because they had to, because they're resource constrained. And just to throw going out there to my Marine Corps cyber friends that I met at US Cyber Command, the Marine Corps is resource constrained in cyber. They can't do much. I'm sorry, they don't have much, but boy, were they really, really good because they found ways of getting around lack of resources and just using ingenuity and creativity to solve problems. So anyways, I think because we have so many resources, we haven't had to tackle some of the problems that other resource constrained countries have had to. So we have a lot to learn.
I was thinking about also critical infrastructure. So securing the critical infrastructure, not just the largest players, but right down the more granular parts of the industry. And I think that's an area that is severely depleted of cybersecurity. They have a poor cybersecurity posture. Not too long ago, General Nakasone said that he would give the U.S. critical infrastructure mid-market a C-, if he was to make a judgment on it. And he said that's concerning. In fact, it resonates right across industry, this concern that we have for critical infrastructure. And of course, that's very closely tied together with the capacity, lack of capacity in cybersecurity. So to what extent do we feel comfortable in building out cybersecurity capacity building programs together with, let's say, our NATO allied friends, and not just at government level, but the ecosystems working with the ecosystems? How comfortable are we with that? I'd like to explore that because it's a sensitive issue. It's a sensitive topic for the very reasons that David pointed out earlier. It gets sensitive when it gets to cybersecurity, but at the same time, when you're talking about securing, helping, let's say, a Swedish company or a Polish company in chemicals to have a better cybersecurity posture, it's good for them, it's good for us, right? How comfortable are we with sharing best practices and actually holding hands down that path? Any thoughts on that, please?
My question, I would answer that with a question: how comfortable are we not sharing? Right. So we have a global economy, we have a global supply chain. Things in our civilian critical infrastructure in the United States and even our military are sourced overseas. So the boundary of our defense basically spans our entire supply chain, which involves multinational corporations and other militaries. So yes, there are absolutely, exquisite capabilities that must be protected and kept close hold. And I'm sure other countries have their exquisite capabilities that they won't want to share with us. But in terms of going back to Nathan's point about the rising tide lifts all boats, certainly the NATO countries need to collectively raise their capability for cyber security, not to be confused with any offensive capability. That's an absolutely fair point on protecting those. But on the defensive side, military, civilian critical infrastructure, defense industrial base, it's all fair game for the adversary, and we have to be able to protect it all. And the only way we can do that starts with a strategy like this, where it becomes a foundational skill like reading or mathematics, as we're educating our next generation.
Beautifully said, Josh. Does anybody know of any good initiatives that are taking place for this international outreach, other than what Michael said earlier, or is that one of the only tools in the toolbox right now?
I'll say that the program that NSA and Cybercom have with the hunt forward teams being unclassed in public. It's not like these are secret missions going on in the dark. These are acknowledged, known missions. Malware samples are brought back and used for the betterment of defense across the board, kind of the rising tide again. And I think it's both a diplomatic and a partnering opportunity, as you know, these missions are approaching the numbering in the hundreds now. And so I think that's a very proactive way that the two agencies here in Maryland, in their particular role, are getting after that sharing and teaming in a way that they can, and again, limiting the risk while they do it.
Thank you, David.
Well, I just wanted to add in instead of necessarily only focusing internationally, let's look at our own selves, right? I think we could do a better job inside the United States, and I think from what I've talked to peers that have gotten out is because what the strategy doesn't talk about. Let me step backwards. It doesn't talk about, at least from the government national security side of cybersecurity, the need for that secret clearance or above, and that's just not a given, right? And certainly on the offensive cyber side, it's hard to do anything without TS. But in defensive cyber, I don't agree. I would say you can do a lot of things with just secret, and then you can do plenty of things even below that. But secret is great, right? And I think we're missing the point where someone gets out of the military or out of government service, could be a non-uniformed person, but has that security clearance, goes to work for a corporation and is still involved in cybersecurity, and we just cut that off. I do wonder if there's some initiative that could take place in which there's, auxiliary force is strong language, and I recognize that idea of like, hey, should cyber be a civilian, a separate force? But is there not some way that the government can better utilize those existing security clearances that move on into the corporate workforce, trust some people to then take that secret knowledge, drive it down to unclassified, and use it in their workplace? I would have no problem if a corporation does better because the U.S. government helped them out. That's fine by me, and it should be fine by the government.
Nice.
Going back to Carlo, your question about what kind of programs are already in place internationally. I don't think it's necessarily a dedicated program, but here in Maryland, there's, I think, a model to look at. The National Guard has the state partnership program, and each one of the 54 Guard entities out there have another country that they work with in support of their military. And Maryland's National Guard works with Estonia. We also have a strong cyber military cyber unit within the Air National Guard here, as well as a smaller presence within the Army side in Maryland, and they work very closely with the military in Estonia. And what I've seen lately is that starting to spread beyond those folks in uniform, and a building economic relationship that's developing between the state of Maryland and the country of Estonia, where that concept of cybersecurity and that cyber literacy that exists is almost baked in as kind of the underlayer within that relationship. It's grown from the military, it's moved over into the private and civilian sector, but because of that close relationship, it's just existing there. Like I said, not a dedicated program. I know not every Guard entity out there has the same cyber presence that the Maryland Guard has, and so that may not be part of their state partnership program. But certainly those that do, or those that are looking to expand upon that, there might be some models or examples to at least emulate a little bit as they start to develop what those individual actions are.
I like that. Anything additional from Michael as we kind of close out this international component?
Yeah, so just piggybacking on this, so definitely the Guard of, I think it's Michigan, has a similar agreement with the country of Latvia as well. So all of this is there. By the way, I do fully agree with David. Information sharing and partnerships must happen within trusted communities. But I think this is also a challenge for all of us, specifically those working in the national security sector, to maybe rethink how we approach some of those clearances and reviews. We live in a world that is full of data points left and right. We should be able to define quantitatively and qualitatively better models to assess what the risk of an individual is. And a passport is likely not going to be a very good indicator of what the person might present as a risk or not. So I'm also bringing that out as a challenge, because I know a lot of CISOs that when I talk to them, they're like, oh yeah, you know what, I think I would love to collaborate with the government, but going through the secret clearance process, no, that's too much for me. And then there's the other aspect, which is, of course, that some of our, no, I'm going to call them adversaries, are competing for them and are coming up with huge offers. I mean, there are some countries that will offer regular first-class flights to wherever it is, giant payments, and you're also dealing with people that might be able to charge for just private consulting northwards of $800 an hour, and for them it's a trade-off conversation. So I think we need to have a way how we approach the professionals in the industry sector as well, and how to get them involved, because I fully believe the magic happens, starts to happen, when we have groups like this, where we're all coming from different government entities or the private sector, and we're putting our heads together. Because, by the way, the tech that you're using in the government sector is not exactly the tech we're using in industry. And what industry does and Silicon Valley does are two separate things as well on top of that. So when we put our heads together, I think that's when we're going to win.
Thank you, Michael. So switching gears, let's talk about something really important that is mentioned so much in the document, in the strategy document, and that's diversity. So let me put it to the panel. How important is diversity in cybersecurity? Can anybody comment to that? And do we agree with the strategies pushed towards diversity and what could be done to achieve that better? Would like to pick up on that.
I think everybody's going to comment on that. I'll jump in early because I imagine everybody's got their opinion on this one. So one of the things we touched on earlier was that tradesmanship, and something that we had within the Air Force is to become 1 Bravo 4, which is our enlisted cyber professionals. They do it at the 4-year point of service. They don't come in and go straight into that field. You get fuels technicians, aircraft maintenance, civil engineers, and it's because they have an interest and they have a desire. They apply to cross-train at that 4-year point ish, based on assignments and things. But what we have found that as we parse through that talent to place them within the cyber field, almost 2/3 of them end up in the offensive cyber area. And it's that diversity of thought on how a jet mechanic, how a fuels technician, how an engineer breaks something or gets after it, which at its essence is what your offensive people are doing. And it's a mindset. We can teach them zeros and ones. We can teach them cyber principles and things, but that idea or that diverse thought, before we even get into gender, race, background, but that diverse thought brings exponential capability to our cyber offensive teams, because they're expected to break things. And breaking is usually coming at it from a direction that nobody else thought of. And so I just, that's one model that the Air Force has that I really think they get right. And I wanted to share that right off the bat with that diverse thought that goes into that career field.
That's beautiful.
I think anytime, sorry, I think anytime you introduce diversity into a workforce, you improve it. You bring in the additional thoughts. So, I mean, there's a lot of political, just standard regurgitation of the need to be more diverse everywhere, which is absolutely a positive thing. But within the strategy, when it talks about that, it's absolutely positive. Bringing in more different ways to look at problems, different ways people think and operate is obviously going to make the workforce stronger holistically. I think we should also not discount the diversity of experience. This is a rapidly changing industry, and you'd be surprised at the innovation that can come out of somebody that's fresh into the workforce over, the graybeards that have been doing this for 30 years, that have been set in their ways. And it's important to incorporate that piece. What I saw, I think, lacking in the strategy is going back to comments made earlier, funding and teeth. There's a lot of stakeholders that are mentioned that are called out, donating money. We're going to, put more things into the colleges, that are representing underserved communities, and build up more programs within those communities to increase diversity. But again, where are we going in earlier? Can we provide additional resources to the pre-college world? The schools that are not funded adequately to even have the devices or the classes necessary for the students to gain access to even discover they want to go in that route. There's the Title I schools that exist all over the country that basically receive federal funding to stay afloat, but are still lagging behind the schools that exist in more affluent neighborhoods within their communities, because they can't provide the computers, the systems, the technology that's up to date to support their students, or to hire the educators that can bring those classes and education into the schools. So again, when we talk about the strategy, it's great. It's absolutely correct. But we need more to actually get us there. And it's the implementation of those objectives that I think is really going to tell us how successful we're being in that regard.
I'm not going to say anything profound. You guys have already said it, but diversity of skills, experience, thoughts, backgrounds. If cyberspace really does pervade all things, then we should really have a good representation from all types of people helping the cyber domain, and even including folks with some disabilities. I know personally people who cannot see who are killing it in the cybersecurity space and industry because certain companies made it almost a safe haven for those types of people to do good work for them. So we should make it easy for folks who can interact with a computer to find their way in the cyberspace domain.
Thank you. That's beautifully said as well. So this kind of segues in nicely into how do you turn a strategy into something that can really be effectively implemented, and that's closely intertwined with the concept of public-private partnerships, partnerships between the government and the private sector, the military and the private sector. I see the comments there. Everybody can see them on the right-hand side of the panel. We have comments around accessibility for handicaps and neurodivergence. How do we create pathways for those? Because the plan, the strategy is very clear, and I think it's a very well set out strategy. My concern, and I think everybody's concern, is funds, of course, and then what actionable steps will be taken to actually implement these strategies. And these steps will inevitably involve more and new partnerships. What do you guys think is necessary? What new government private partnerships are necessary? What's next? In preparing this talk, I've had some conversations with folks, and people are saying, well, perhaps there should be, some more, private sector organizations to support military and support government in cybersecurity, policy making and cybersecurity actions. What are your thoughts? This is a very broad, open question, but I think really, really important. And with the vast set of perspectives that we have around the table today, I think the cross-pollination of your thoughts on this subject would be really powerful.
Yeah, I'll just throw something out there for K through 12, because I think it's relatively speaking, compared to the national landscape, a smaller step to take. So I'm on the board of a local school district foundation that raises private funding to fund things at schools that we think should be funded. For example, cybersecurity classes, courses, training, groups, competitions, whatever it needs to be. So I think maybe that's possibly one small step that all of us can take who have been in the cyberspace for any amount of time, is just getting involved with local K through 12 schools and trying to find ways of raising private donations. Doesn't have to be government funded.
Thank you, David. Anyone else?
I think, especially when we talk about K through 12 and the mindset, we need to get out of our own way. We are, in some aspects, so set in our mentality about certain things that this is the way it's going to be, that we're incapable of innovating and looking at alternative ways to incentivize and reward progress in this area. One example, and I saw one of the comments earlier talked about MOOCs as well. There are students that, in middle school, high school that can, present a strong aptitude and talent for working in this industry. And they may not have the classes available to them in their school, certainly not at the levels that they operate at. They can, you get somebody that's a whiz with computers, and the best thing that they have available to them is they can go learn Java for a couple years in their high school. They're going to be bored. They're going to be, disenfranchised or disinterested in actually pursuing that workforce. But if the schools can make allowances for credit, academic credit, or other types of ways that actually help progress them in what their ultimate goal is, graduate and move on to the workforce, by taking online courses, by demonstrating their knowledge and abilities through other means besides sitting in a classroom for 180 days out of the year and passing that final at the end of the year. That's actually a very low cost to entry and a way to, I think, very quickly increase the interest level and demonstrate the ability to implement some of these programs that the strategy talks about.
Yeah, at a higher level, I think that the national laboratory and the defense laboratory system is a critical part of this. Los Alamos, Air Force, Army, Navy, National Lab. There's a reason they're able to process different funding. There's a reason they're able to do the partnership with industry. Once upon a time, defense innovation was centered around these labs, and it was the highest end pinnacle of where this is. We've watched that shift to industry over the last few decades, and that's not a good or a bad thing. That's just a reality. But these laboratories are still a focus for federal and defense interests or concerns. And the more that, industry may not want to get the clearance that Richard was talking about and go through what it takes to become cleared. But these laboratories are that middle ground where you don't necessarily need that. And they can toss it over the fence to the other side where it is. And so I think as a public-private partnership, we need to continue to use the national labs and the defense labs as a broker and a participant in the space, because they allow parties to be involved that otherwise we can't get to, at least on the defense side. Without going through them, we just can't partner with some of these industry, some of the people in industry with the most talent.
So throughout the
We have Colonel Richard.
Thanks, Michael. I'll go.
Okay. Yep.
I think also from that K-12 and anywhere else, we shouldn't just look to educate someone who ends up working in the cyberspace. I want someone who is whether I'm talking, I put on my Army hat and I think the plans in We War Game for 2040. We want to believe that second lieutenant 18 years from now is just really good at cyber things, but that person might be an armor officer. That person might, not actually do cyber things. So I think that in the civilian workforce, it's the same thing. We need people to grow up with that digital fluency and that digital literacy, even if that's not the job they take, because overall it's going to make everything better. And you're probably not going to have any job where there isn't that requirement, even if you're not, even if you're just, out there doing something that almost today doesn't seem to have a lot to do with cyber. But if you start to build that understanding, just the way, like I like to think of it is, we have a certain expectation of what children know by 12th grade. And there's a lot of basic things built in there. And so some basic cyber ideas need to be part of that. And I don't think I would be able to tell you what those are, but I'm sure there's some experts that could think through that.
So what I wanted to talk about was, so let's assume have this part fixed. We've come up with a concept for pre-K, K-12 and before that. Now, the next part is we all recognize that there's multiple avenues how somebody might end up getting the more advanced education to get into cybersecurity finally. Traditionally speaking, it was a degree. But I think what we should do is we should create a specific working group or council, whatever, public, private, that focuses on defining those alternate pathways a little bit better, formalizing them so they actually can stand by themselves, next to a degree as a viable option. There's a lot of different models. I think one model that might be interesting, specific for people that might not be able to afford college, is Germany has what's called the dual vocational school system. So you're actually going to a company, the company pays you a fairly minimum amount of money, but you're getting paid, and you rotate between a vocational trade school and the company. And some of those systems are so good that actually I can talk about this. Deutsche Bank prefers people that come from there initially rather than people coming with a bachelor's degree from a university. Because, of course, the people work with them internally. They were basically being raised to work within the company, if you want to say it like that, and they've received the education as well. So I think models like that we should start exploring in addition to other possible options.
Yeah, I think that's a very powerful model, Michael. I think that's something that we have discussed over the last few years, and as yet hasn't really been. We haven't been able to move that needle significantly, and maybe there's a little bit too much fragmentation, because it is a new field. This whole thing that that is going on now, and there are so many different organizations, nonprofits. Associations, government bodies, pseudo-government bodies, military organizations, and we're all kind of operating kind of in our own world, in our own path. And I'm just wondering how we can better serve the purposes of what the government wants to achieve by trying to unify the movement and make it a little bit more coordinated. I just feel that it lacks a little coordination. But as we move to wrap up, what I'd like to do is to perhaps ask each of you to give me some parting thoughts of your comments on the subject, and your final words on it, and maybe one recommendation that you would say, I'd really want to see this being done better. Let me start off with perhaps David. Would you like to kick it off?
I'm taking that I'm the right David, Carlo. But,
yes, I beg your pardon. Yeah, yes, you're at the top of my screen. David, I'm sorry.
So I would say, having made my transition from government to industry this last year, that the biggest piece that I've seen is there is an innate fear of the ethics and the rules and the things that are in place for industry and government to partner. Those rules were put in place because at some point someone stepped out of bounds or did something, at some point to draw scrutiny or review. And now I'm trying to give back to a mission I very much believe in and do things. And for example, we have a cyber lunch that goes on, here in Maryland every month, down supporting the 3 agencies at Fort Meade. Those tickets are $75. That's a normal lunch here in the DC metro area for an event or a venue. But we're over some $26 limit in government, and Civ can't come unless they're coming out of pocket. The rules haven't kept up, and it makes it very hard to partner. And so I'm not saying the rules shouldn't be in place, but they probably need to be relooked at when we feel that a government official or someone in this position is going to be swayed because they ate a $75 lunch at a venue at the convention center or something. It doesn't pass the logic test. And so now I'm struggling to partner back with an agency in an area I came from, and I'm running into barriers that seem almost foolish. So my one thing would be, if it would help us if we could get after that, which in turn would allow this public-private academic partnership to move forward much smoother.
I'll go as the other David. I'm going to harp on the K-12 idea again. I think it's something that's tractable. It's something that we can all do. If you know something about the cyber domain, you can go into your local community, even community colleges, and even volunteer to talk about it, lecture on it, introduce young folks to it. someone may put in the comment something about if we don't, if we try to solve this at too high of a level and don't think about K through 12, then we're going to be resetting every 12 years or whatever it is. That kind of haunts me. If we don't create enough awareness and pull and interest in the young people in all the communities, then, maybe we're just solving this for one moment in time and we have to reset again in 12 years. So get out in the community, volunteer, show up in a classroom and talk about it.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. Maybe Richard D'Angelo?
Thanks. I think it add on the importance of putting excitement in there. I think certainly from a military perspective, one thing we can sell is, hey, if you come to us and you work in the cyber arena, you're going to battle against the best, and there's national security purpose. But I think that's true in general, right? That this is a particular part of the world in which you can make an impact that's not just because the dollar and bills that you're getting paid. And so I think that should be part of the overall strategy, is building that excitement, build it. I think I saw somebody in the comments make that point, and David, you're just absolutely right about that, right? The more we talk about and show that this is something where you can be an expert in, and you can give back and have that greater community purpose, whether you're in the military or on the industry side.
Thank you, Richard. And Nathan Rolfe, please, would you say a few words?
Yeah, I think I've already covered most of my big comments on the strategy. I just want to reemphasize that, as a workforce strategy at the national level, this is about our national culture almost, in a way. And what it says in the strategy, and where I think we can add more, is just how much this permeates through every aspect of our lives on a daily basis. And from education, from K through 12 on up, it's just important for us to recognize and do our part, as the other panelists have already said, do our part to get out in the community to help foster that growth from that 5-year-old going into kindergarten, waiting on the bus that's probably got a device on him of some kind, all the way up to our grandparents who have been fighting the good fight and are losing the fact that the world around them is going digital, and they need to learn how to use the same device as their kindergarten grandson. But we can get out there and we can really, I think make this more integrated into what our life is as a society, and not just about, how do we fill empty jobs.
Thank you, Nate. So yeah, let's move to Michael, and we'll finish up with Josh.
Well, a lot of very good points actually have been said. I'm going to use the same phrase. Maybe what I want to do is I just want to address actually my industry colleagues. There sometimes seems to be an attitude in industry that government is it's its own world, separate thing. I don't need to really care about what's happening in there. I don't really need to worry about the issues that are happening in this domain. And I think this is really, really wrong, because cyber is something that affects society. The threats to cyber affect society. Your organizations are part of that society. And this is the reason why you should all try to understand these issues, why you should become involved in public-private partnership, and which is why you should try to understand the government side of things as well to a certain degree. You don't need to be an expert in national security, but if you pay a little bit more attention to what threat actors are out there, the interplay between organized crime and state actors, and how they view things, then you get a better assessment of what the actual risk exposure for your own company is. And this all goes back down to one fact is, again, if we all come together, we put our heads together, that is going to provide the most optimal solution for a societal challenge.
Thank you, Michael. Josh.
Hi, so it's been a great panel. We've covered a lot of territory. I submit a lot of it's exceeded the boundaries of the strategy. So bringing it back to the strategy, there've been a lot of comments, very, very well articulated, very on point comments about policy that comes without funding is useless. It's a waste of time, etc. And that's absolutely correct. And it plays out just far too often where policymakers put in a lot of work to generate a document like this, and it really doesn't have teeth. But the other side of that is that, especially in government, funding rarely materializes without policy. So while this policy is, what the strategy is not a guarantee that any individual part of it will be funded or will be successful, it certainly opens the door. So it becomes incumbent on those of us that work in the space to become evangelists at every level, to include, those that are parents going to school board meetings and saying, hey, there's a national imperative to do this. And I want my children to be competitive in the global marketplace with these skills, and schools need to weave them into the curriculum. And here's a federal strategy that says this is the way the country should be embracing this. We need to be better at embracing talent potential, whether it's in government or in industry, which goes back to HR professionals and hiring managers need to be able to interview people who may not have the certifications that are mandatory, and giving them a shot and saying, hey, you know what? It's more cost effective for me in industry to hire you and take a gamble. I'm going to pay to send you to that boot camp and take that test. And you'll be a valued loyal employee, hopefully, for the investment that we've shown you. Because I think increasingly we're risk averse, and we want to hire the sure thing that has all of the requirements that we set forth, no matter how realistic, as opposed to holding those requirements what we really need and interviewing the quality, hungry candidate who's willing to do the work to become the person that you're trying to hire when you can't find the person you're trying to hire. That's all I have. Thank you all.
Josh, thank you very much. I would like to thank everybody on the panel. It's been an absolute honor to moderate this panel. I'm humbled. I'm grateful to have met you all. I'm also grateful to the audience and for the very good points and questions and comments that have been put along on the sidebar. Thank you all. This video will be published on our website, at the Institute website, and also on our YouTube channel. Please do tune in and do join the Institute if you possibly can. It would be lovely to have more conversations of this kind. Thank you all.